Nintendo Switch 2's launch timing situation just got a little bit more interesting because now we have some conflicting reports from major outlets suggesting that Nintendo said, no, you know what, this fiscal year, because their Switch 2 numbers are not in the forecast, that there's no chance we should be expecting the system until April 2025 at the soonest. And that's where I really want to break down a little bit of misinterpretation from these outlets such as IGN and gamesindustry.biz, because there's more underneath this story than just reading the headlines, because Nintendo did not say that it can't come out before April, and I wouldn't necessarily go around reading the headlines and just believing them at face value. So we'll deep dive what Nintendo really said about their potential release timing and what we know so far, as well as what insiders and leakers are telling us. And then I also want to briefly discuss some good news surrounding the launch of the console when it comes to how many of these units we should expect to be able to find on store shelves. We know historically when a new hot ticket item comes out, scalping is a very real issue that gamers face. You see the console release and then lo and behold, you're buying it for double, triple the price on eBay, or just having to stick to your computer with notifications on from every retailer and stock tracker account to try to secure one. And not saying that won't happen to some degree with the Switch 2 launch, but Nintendo does seem very confident that they are going to be able to largely meet consumer demand. So we'll get on the same page with all of these new details. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And we have to first kick it off by reading through a portion of IGN's article that was getting shared around a bunch online yesterday, as well as the original source, and then break down what it really means in terms of Nintendo Switch 2's potential launch time, because as mentioned, if you just read the headline of these articles and move on, you might not be in the correct information loop. So first, IGN, don't expect the Nintendo Switch 2 before April 2025. Nintendo has signaled that its Switch successor console will not come out until April 2025 at the earliest. In an investor-focused question and answer session translated by gamesindustry.biz, Nintendo president Shintaro Furukawa confirmed that its forecast for the current fiscal year does not include sales of the console dubbed Switch 2. And gamesindustry.biz's headline reads, Nintendo forecast doesn't include Switch 2 before April 2025. During an investor call, President Shintaro Furukawa said he doesn't expect supply issues, but the platform holder hasn't yet discussed launch timing. In the Q&A transcript of this week's earnings call, translated by gamesindustry.biz, Nintendo's President Shintaro Furukawa told investors the sales forecasts for this period do not include sales of the Nintendo Switch successor device. He later said that Nintendo hasn't yet discussed launch timing for the company's next console, but its absence from the sales forecast suggests it is quite possible the device will not be made available during this fiscal year. However, the full context to the question that he was answering reads as follows. If the expected hardware sales volume for the current fiscal year ending March 2025 does not include the successor model of Nintendo Switch, the decline compared to the previous fiscal year ending March 2024 will seem small. Do you think that even if you announce a successor model, the momentum of Nintendo Switch business will not be affected? Furukawa then clarifies and answers, the expected sales volume for the current fiscal year does not include the successor model of Nintendo Switch. Although sales of the Nintendo Switch hardware have remained relatively strong, it is now in its 8th year since its release. So a couple things to unpack there. First of all, we have to look at Nintendo's history, because if you rewind to when the NX was revealed, their sales forecast then for that fiscal year that should have included the March sales of the Nintendo Switch was not entirely clear either, and we didn't have like a hard number on how many units they were dedicating of sales for the new Nintendo Switch, because it was, first of all, at the very end of the fiscal year. Second of all, Nintendo can readjust their forecast throughout the year to investors. And lastly, Furukawa's comments was just clarifying that 13.5 million number for the Switch does not include Switch successor hardware. He is not saying that they can't launch the console within that fiscal year, which would then also allow them to revise their forecast and so forth and so on. Not to mention, you have to realize that even if they do launch this thing in the fiscal year, nobody's really expecting it to come out this holiday. There's some theories online about that. I am not personally expecting that. And if you buy into any of the more reliable leakers online, such as Midori, Nate the Hate, Necro Felipe, even VGC and Eurogamer, amongst many other outlets, all of their sources, meaning game devs that they have connections with, have been telling them that March 2025 is the firm date and the firm plan, and that is what developers are being told at this time. Nintendo's big mission with revealing the Switch 2 with this Phase 1 announcement was just to get it on the radar of investors that they're going to announce it this fiscal year. To be clear, we don't know the exact official launch timing, and things can change, of course, But just because Shintaro Furukawa is outlining that his fiscal year forecast doesn't include Switch successor sales or Switch 2 sales, that does not tie their hands from launching it this fiscal year, and it shouldn't set your expectations any differently in terms of when Nintendo might actually go to market with this console. I've mentioned in the previous videos where we've been talking about this since the Switch 2 floodgates have more or less opened that I am in the mindset we're going to see a very copy and paste approach to the Nintendo Switch's marketing campaign and launch cycle and things. So I'm expecting fully September, October range to learn more about the console, the official name and things like that in a first look trailer. Then January, some kind of big blowout event where we learn all of the information we want to know about this thing in a hands-on kind of in-depth presentation format. And March, we are going to be talking about it being available on store shelves. Could it be in the early portion of March? Maybe. Could it be later than March and not come out this fiscal year? That's definitely a realistic possibility. But as mentioned, I really wanted to dive into maybe not really just going with some of these headlines that are being spread around online, because it's really just misinterpreting Shintaro Furukawa's answer to a direct question on whether or not the 13.5 number that he was forecasting for Switch hardware sales specifically was including the successor model, and it is not. Now that does beg the question, will Nintendo do a price cut this holiday season? And they very well might on the Nintendo Switch family of systems. We haven't seen them do one yet, and this would maybe be the perfect time to pull out that last go-to solution to move more units, and that's like drop the base console down to 250, drop the OLED down to 300, and maybe they get crazy with the light model since it's more, one that you might buy for your kid or something like that. And during the holiday season, maybe we see that get marked all the way down to $99. $150 would still be a great price point, but imagine seeing that thing for $99 and the kind of library of games it could play. It would be a no-brainer pickup, and that could be one of those things how Nintendo is planning to hit this rather aggressive number of 13.5 million units in the 8th year of sales for Nintendo Switch. Now, the part 2 I want to discuss in this video has to deal with the supply issues that we might see around a new console launch. I mean, if you were around for even the most recent generations like the PS5 and Xbox Series X and S, you probably remember, of course, that launched during a pandemic, but you couldn't find those things anywhere for a couple years easily. You couldn't just walk into a store and pick one up, and it's only been within the last year that was even really on the table consistently. So you always kind of worry about stuff like that in the age of bots and online purchases, primarily because these retailers go live and immediately, whether you have the item in your cart and you're trying to check out or not, things just don't always go according to plan, and you do get that out of stock notification and you can't complete your purchase, and next thing you know, you have scalpers online selling this thing for double, triple price. Well, Nintendo has made it very clear in previous investor meetings that they were trying to do everything they could to mitigate the stock supply issues with Switch 2. That is even one of the rumors, alongside of maybe some of the software development time, on why it might have been internally pushed back from a original planned launch of late 2024 to 2025. Well, now you have some additional information we can shed on that as part of their latest financial briefing, where you can see the following Go Nintendo article, which reads, Nintendo doesn't foresee component supply issues with Switch's successor. In recent years, multiple tech companies have had trouble securing the parts they need to create their hardware. Even Nintendo had mentioned in past years that they had struggled to find companies who had what they needed and could manufacture the Switch at a decent rate. Thankfully, it appears these supply issues have cleared up in 2024, and Nintendo expects smooth sailing ahead. Shintaro Furukawa's exact comments read, regarding the supply of the successor model to Nintendo Switch, we have not yet talked about the release timing, so we cannot give a specific answer, but at this point there is no shortage of supply of semiconductor parts, etc., as there was until the year before last. We do not anticipate that the supply of such products will become a major problem when a successor model is released. So this part is good news across the board. There's no way you can interpret this negatively. This is Nintendo just straight up being confident in their suppliers and their components that they need to source for Switch 2, that they feel good about where they're at and with the partnerships that they have, and they're not going to be in a situation where they're launching a console and nobody can find the thing to purchase it even if they wanted to, because that is a bad end user experience at the end of the day. And even if it was part of the reason that there was an internal 6-month delay for this thing, if it was gonna launch holiday season 2024 originally, I do think that along with maybe software needing to be polished up to be ready to go, to have a great launch lineup, things like that do make sense at the end of the day. Even though we want this thing in our hands as soon as possible, it does make more business sense to be able to meet consumer demand when you initially launch something and not just have a fiasco and have people paying triple price online parent trying to get their kid this thing for Christmas, and you know the drill with all of that. Nobody likes paying triple price and just straight up getting ripped off for something they really want. So Nintendo being ahead of this issue and being very confident with their investors that they're going to be able to at least meet demand or just really not have a component shortage around the launch of this console is a good news scenario, especially after we saw what console launches can look like during the years of 2020 with the other consoles. Not to mention, I mean, you can go back to the Wii days. You had to line up. I lined up outside of a Toys R Us with my mom at 7 a.m. and I think we got there like second to last that had available vouchers. It was one of those things where I was calling around stores for weeks and weeks just to get like rumors of when they might get their next stock wave, and that was before online purchases were like the predominant way that people bought consoles and before bots were even a thing. So it is a much better buying experience when you can just walk into a store, find the console you want, give your money to the company, and walk out with it. And that hopefully is what we will more or less be dealing with the launch of Nintendo Switch 2. But that's where I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What do you make of Shintaro Furukawa's comments? Do you think that he's actually insinuating by not including the Switch successor in this year's fiscal year sales forecast that it means it's not coming out and you're on board with IGN and gamesindustry.biz? Or do you think there's more nuance to this conversation and he's really just answering the question that the 13.5 number is for the Switch's sales and not including any successor model, but that doesn't rule it out from it being included in this fiscal year, especially at the tail end of the fiscal year, which is March of 2025. And lastly, are you relieved like I am to hear that Nintendo seems like they more or less are confident in their supply for this next gen console? And if it does come out in March of 2025, are you planning on trying to pick one up day one, or will you wait until later on? So thanks so much for watching the video today, everyone. Make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave the video, regardless of if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.